Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening the files on a figure who he essentially defines a specific frequency of the 1990s.
Oh, for
You
sure.
know the sound. It's that grinding, harmonized dread that somehow, against all odds, became pop radio gold. We are talking about Layne Staley.
The voice of Alice in Chains. And, I mean, probably the most imitated voice in modern rock history. I think that's fair to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you go into any bar with a cover band right now, anywhere in the world, you're going to hear someone trying to do the Layne Staley growl.
And almost certainly failing.
Almost certainly failing. But here's the thing, and this is why I wanted to pull this stack of research today. I feel like Layne Staley has been reduced to a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
You know? He's the tortured grunge god. He's the cautionary tale.
He's the tragedy.
He's the tragedy, exactly.
It's the saint of the sad archetype. It's just very easy to box him in there and leave it at that.
It is. And look, the tragedy is there. We have the source material, the biography, the police reports, the interviews, and it gets incredibly dark. We aren't going to shy away from any of that.
No.
But the mission today for this deep dive is to dig past that headline. Because when I was reading through all these notes, I kept finding this duality, this conflict.
It's the conflict between the legend and the actual guy. Right. The person who lived behind the voice.
Right. We're going to find a guy who wasn't just, born wearing flannel and brooding in the Seattle rain. We're talking about a drummer who desperately wanted to be a singer. We're talking about a glam metal enthusiast.
The glam metal enthusiast who, let's not forget, dressed in drag.
We're definitely getting into the drag, for sure. But also a guy with a wicked sense of humor. That's the part that I feel gets completely lost in the shuffle.
Oh, completely.
So if you think you know the story, if you think it's just Man in the Box and then a slow fade to black, you're missing like half the picture. We've got connections between his childhood religion and those famous lyrics that, I have to admit, I never put together before.
And some really, really unsettling synchronicities regarding the end of his life that are just, they're chilling, frankly.
They really are. So let's rewind. Let's get out of the grunge era entirely for a second. Because to understand the ending, we really have to go back and look at the origin. Layne Staley, Bellevue, Washington, born 1967.
August 22, 1967. So a Pacific Northwest local through and through. But if we are really talking about origins, we have to talk about identity. Because he spent the first chunk of his life trying to figure out who he was, literally starting with his name.
He wasn't born Layne Staley. I mean, that wasn't his full name.
He was born Layne Rutherford Staley.
Rutherford.
Okay, I'm trying to picture a rock star screaming, "Hello, Seattle,"
Yeah!
and introducing himself as Layne Rutherford.
It doesn't quite have the edge, does it?
It really doesn't.
It sounds like a 19th century president or something.
He sounds like a banker or a history professor. And apparently, he hated it with an absolute passion. The sources all mention that he would get visibly angry if people used that middle name. It was a real sore spot for him.
Okay, so he changes it.
So in his teens, he legally changed it to Thomas.
Layne Thomas Staley.
Exactly. Now pause for a second here. Why Thomas?
I would assume it's a family name. His dad, his grandfather, something like that.
You would assume that. That's the logical leap. But no, he chose Thomas because he was obsessed with Tommy Lee.
Wait. The drummer from Mötley Crüe.
The very same. This is what I mean about breaking that grunge stereotype right from the jump. Teenage Layne Staley wasn't looking at moody poets for inspiration. He was looking at the Sunset Strip.
He was looking at hairspray and spandex and, rotating drum kits that go upside down.
The whole spectacle. He idolized the showmanship of it all.
That is hilarious. It actually makes a lot of sense, though, because Layne started as a drummer, right? He wasn't always the guy out front with the mic.
Correct. That's a huge point. He started playing drums at age 12. He was the kid in the back. But the source material highlights this really interesting tension. He was a drummer who played in all these glam bands in his early teens, but he secretly, desperately wanted to be the singer.
He wanted the microphone.
He wanted the spotlight.
It's the classic Dave Grohl or Phil Collins trajectory. The guy in the back of the bus knowing he can do it better than the guy in the front.
Exactly. But there was a lot of instability in the background while all this musical ambition was happening. His parents divorced when he was 7. He was raised by his mom, Nancy, and his stepfather, Jim Elmer.
And speaking of names, he actually went by Layne Elmer for a while in high school, didn't he?
He did. So he's Layne Rutherford, then he's Layne Elmer, then he becomes Layne Thomas, and then finally just Layne Staley.
That's a lot of shifting identities for a kid. It really is.
Yeah. It suggests someone who's just trying on different skins, trying to find the one that fits. But the biggest influence on his psyche And eventually his lyrics, it wasn't the divorce or the name changes, it was the religion.
This was the part of the research that really, really made me sit up. I always knew Alice in Chains had lyrics that were, let's call them skeptical of religion.
That's a diplomatic way to put it.
Yeah. But I always just chalked it up to, standard teenage rebellion, question authority, that kind of thing.
It was much more specific and I think much more personal than that. Layne was raised as a Christian Scientist until he was 16 years old.
Okay, and for listeners who might not know the details, Christian Science isn't just going to church on Sundays. It's a very, very specific worldview, right?
It is deeply rigorous. The core tenet, to put it simply, is that the material world, and specifically sickness, pain, and disease, is an illusion. It's an error in thought.
So you don't treat illness with medicine.
You don't. You treat it with prayer. You treat it by correcting your thought patterns to align with God's perfect reality, where sickness doesn't exist.
Wow. So if you're a kid and you scrape your knee or you get the flu, the messaging isn't, here's a Band-Aid or take some Tylenol. It's, this pain isn't real.
Exactly. Your pain is an illusion that you need to pray away. Now imagine being a child who is naturally sensitive, perceptive, and maybe feeling things very, very deeply. And he's being told constantly that what he feels, what his body is telling him, isn't real.
That is a recipe for a massive, massive disconnect from your own experience.
And that disconnect, according to the sources, it fueled a lot of anger in him. There's a really telling quote from a 1991 interview where Layne just unloads on this. He talks about seeing people being brainwashed.
Right.
He says he had a fascination with how people would give up their money, their time, and their entire lives for a cause that he felt was wrong.
He actually said, and I wrote this down, for a cause there sure is right, but I'm sure is wrong. That's not confusion. That's judgment. That's a firm stance.
It is. He'd seen it from the inside, and he made a conscious choice to reject it. He decided, explicitly, to stop believing in anything apart from himself in his own experience.
And if you fast forward to his songwriting, I mean, you see it everywhere. Look at a track like Get Born Again.
Which is a terrifying song, by the way. The sound of it is just so bleak.
It is. And in 1999, Layne confirmed that that song is about religious hypocrisy. It's a direct shot.
And then you go back to their biggest hit, Man in the Box, and he's screaming, "Deny your maker." That isn't just a cool, edgy metal slogan.
No.
It's a direct rejection of the Christian Science God he grew up with. He is fundamentally asserting the reality of his own pain.
Deny your maker takes on a whole new meaning when you think about it as, deny the God who tells me that my suffering is an illusion.
Precisely. He's screaming, no, this pain is real. I am real. This box is real.
Okay, so let's pivot from that to the music that actually shaped that sound. Because if his ideological influence was this profound rejection of religion, his musical influences were chaotic.
Eclectic is the polite word. Chaotic might be better, yeah. He cites Black Sabbath as his first and primary influence.
Which, okay, that's the obvious one. You listen to Alice in Chains, you hear the sludge, you hear the down-tuned guitars. That's Sabbath 101. No surprise there.
But then on the same list, he has Prince and David Bowie.
Prince? The purple one? I'm trying to connect the dots between War Pigs and Raspberry Beret, and I'm struggling.
I know. But then you add the Stooges to that mix, and then industrial acts like Ministry and Skinny Puppy.
Hold on. How do you mix Prince and Skinny Puppy? One is pure funk pop perfection and joyousness, and the other is literally the sound of a factory imploding for 45 minutes.
But that's the genius of Layne Staley, isn't it? He took the theatricality and the incredible vocal range of someone like Prince or Bowie, that ability to project a persona, to perform,
right,
and he welded it to the raw, visceral aggression of Iggy Pop and the Stooges, and then he coated it all in the mechanical, repetitive dread of industrial music.
So he's not just a metal singer. He's a performance artist who just happens to like incredibly heavy riffs.
I think that's the perfect way to describe him. Which brings us very neatly to the visual evidence of that performance art. We need to talk about the glam years.
Yes, please. This is my favorite part of the stack. Because I think people forget that before 1991, before Nirvana broke, the entire rock world was swimming in hairspray.
Oh, it was an ocean of Aquanet.
And Layne was right there doing the backstroke.
He wasn't just swimming, he was competing. In 1984, he joined a band of students from Shorewood High called Sleaze.
Spelled S-L-E-Z-E, of course.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Because the letter A was clearly not cool enough.
Incredible.
And this wasn't some, jeans and t-shirt garage band.
Yeah.
They were fully 100% committed to the glam aesthetic. Makeup, crazy hair, the whole nine yards.
And they were on TV, right?
They were. In 1985, they made a cameo in a low-budget public access movie called Father Rock. And if you dig deep enough on the internet, you can find the footage of Layne Staley, the future voice of grunge doom, looking like he just walked off the set of a Poison video. It's amazing.
But Sleaze eventually morphed, right? They changed members and became something else?
They did. In 1986, Sleaze morphed into Alice in Chains.
But not the Alice in Chains we know. There's a crucial difference in the spelling.
A huge difference. This was spelled Alice, apostrophe, and, quote, chains, like Guns N' Roses.
Got it.
And the concept, well, Layne described it best himself. He said they dressed in drag and played speed metal.
Let me just stop you there.
Yeah.
Dressed in drag and played speed metal. Those are two subcultures that historically did not get along.
Not at all.
You had the hair metal guys over here, and you had the thrash metal guys over there, and they usually wanted to beat each other up in the parking lot.
And somehow Layne bridged the gap. They were on stage, in dresses and makeup, playing Slayer and Armored Saint covers.
That is bold. I mean, that is genuinely punk rock in its attitude.
It was all about shock value. And it shows that Layne had this incredible sense of humor. He wanted to provoke a reaction. He wasn't this guy sitting in a corner crying about his feelings. He was on stage in fishnets, screaming Slayer lyrics.
That is a vital part of his personality that the sad sack narrative completely erases.
It totally erases it. He was a showman.
So how do we get from this drag-wearing speed metal band to the real Alice in Chains? It involves a chance meeting at a very specific, very grungy location.
The Music Bank. This was a rehearsal studio in Seattle, a pretty grimy place by all accounts. And in 1987, Layne met a guitarist named Jerry Cantrell at a party there.
And Jerry he wasn't doing so well at the time, was he?
Jerry was effectively homeless. He'd just gotten kicked out of his family's house after a fight. Had nowhere to go.
So he's at this party basically couch surfing.
Exactly. And Layne, being the guy he was, found out Jerry was homeless and just invited him to move in with him at the Music Bank.
So before they were ever bandmates, they were roommates.
They were roommates living in this dilapidated 24/7 rehearsal space. Just two broke guys surrounded by instruments and probably not a lot of food.
That creates a bond that you can't just manufacture. You learn someone's rhythms, their habits, their darkest humor.
You really do. They were living in each other's pockets for over a year.
But they weren't playing together yet, which seems crazy to me. You have Layne Staley and Jerry Cantrell living in the same room. Why weren't they writing songs immediately?
Because Layne didn't want to be in Jerry's band. At that point, Layne was actually in a funk band.
A funk band. Okay, the journey continues. We've gone from glam to speed metal to funk. The man had range.
He was exploring. He was trying everything. So Layne's funk band needed a guitarist. He asked Jerry to join, and Jerry said, okay, I'll be your sideman, but only if you join my band.
The old quid pro quo, the rock and roll trade-off.
Exactly. And Jerry's band was the one that already included drummer Sean Kinney and bassist Mike Starr. The core was there. But Layne was dragging his feet. He really wanted to make this funk thing work.
So Jerry and the guys, they came up with a plan to break him.
A plan of psychological warfare.
This is the stripper anecdote. I love this because it sounds like a plot from a sitcom. It's so ridiculous.
It really is.
Yeah.
So they wanted Layne to be their lead singer. Layne wouldn't commit. So they started holding auditions for a new lead singer right in front of Layne in their shared rehearsal space.
Oh, that's cold.
And they intentionally brought in the absolute worst singers they could possibly find.
So Layne is just sitting on the couch trying to, I don't know, eat a sandwich, and he's watching these terrible vocalists just butcher songs.
And Jerry's looking at him the whole time like, well, I guess we'll have to hire this guy unless someone else steps up.
It's brilliant.
But Layne just laughed it off at first. He knew exactly what they were doing. He wasn't falling for it. Until they brought in the final straw.
The nuclear option.
They auditioned a male stripper.
Who I assume was not a trained vocalist.
He was not a trained vocalist. And apparently, his performance was so egregious, so offensive to Layne's musical sensibilities, that he finally just snapped.
He couldn't take it anymore.
He got angry. He basically stood up and said, fine, that's it. I'll join the damn band. Just get him out of here.
So the legendary lineup of Alice in Chains exists because Layne Staley could not handle watching a male stripper try to sing.
History turns on the smallest, most ridiculous pivots.
And so they take the name from Layne's old band.
Eventually, yeah. They flirted with some other names first. For a while, they were called Diamond Lie.
Okay, very 80s.
Very 80s. And then, unbelievably, they considered a band name that was just the word fuck.
Fuck, just the word.
Just the word.
It's hard to put on a marquee. Hard to get radio play with that one.
Yeah, your marketing options are a little limited. So they went back to Layne's old name, Alice in Chains, modified the spelling to one we know now, and the beast was born.
Okay, so section 3 is the rise to stardom. And it's meteoric. It happens so fast. But it almost ended before it even started because of a very Seattle problem.
The drug raid. A massive one. They had a local promoter, a guy named Randy Houser, who was going to pay for their first professional demos. This is their golden ticket, their big shot.
And the recording was booked at the Music Bank where they live.
Right. And the day before they were supposed to go in and record, the police kicked the doors in on the entire facility.
What are they looking for?
Everything. It turned out to be the biggest cannabis raid in Washington state history at that time. The entire studio was shut down, declared a crime scene.
So the demo money is gone, the studio's locked up, they're back to square one.
But they scraped it together, they found another way, and they recorded what became known as the Treehouse tapes in 1988.
And those are the tapes that got them noticed.
Those are the tapes. They made their way to Susan Silver and Kelly Curtis, who were managing Soundgarden at the time.
So that's the stamp of approval right there.
That's the cosign from Seattle royalty. And that got them the attention of Columbia Records, who signed them in 1989.
And then in 1990, Facelift drops, and the world gets Man in the Box.
The song that changed the radio landscape, it sounded like nothing else.
I want to pause here and get technical for a minute, because Man in the Box sounds different than Pearl Jam. It sounds different than Nirvana. What exactly is Layne doing with his voice there that makes it so unique?
It's a technique that's often described as tensed throat vocals.
Okay, explain that like I'm 5. What does that mean?
Okay, so imagine you are trying to scream, but at the exact same time, you are tightening your neck muscles and your pharynx. You're constricting the airflow to create friction and pressure.
It's like putting your thumb over the end of a garden hose.
That is the perfect analogy. The water, or in this case the sound, comes out faster and harder, but it's under immense pressure.
That sounds incredibly painful, and probably terrible for your vocal cords.
It is extremely taxing physically. Most vocal coaches would, scream at you for doing it. But the sound it produces is this metallic, grinding, resonant tone. He sounds like a human distortion pedal.
And he's layering that over the guitars. He's not just singing on top of them.
That's the absolute key. In Man in the Box, and a lot of their songs, he is singing in unison with Jerry's guitar riff. Not an octave above, not a harmony unison. He is matching the frequency of the distortion.
And then Jerry sings the harmony underneath that.
Right. And Jerry has that drier, more classic rock, almost country rock voice.
So you have Layne's garden hose under pressure, scream, layered exactly with the guitar. And then you have Jerry's smooth, dry, lower harmony underneath it all.
And that friction between those two voices and the voice and the guitar, it creates a sound that is uniquely Alice in Chains. It sounds huge. It sounds like a wall coming down on you.
And it resonated. Facelift was a huge hit. But Dirt in 1992, that was the monster.
Dirt is the masterpiece.
Yeah.
It's the defining statement, quadruple platinum.
Yeah.
But it's also where the darkness becomes the text, not just the subtext.
He was still really involved creatively, though, right? It wasn't just him showing up to sing.
Oh, absolutely. He even designed the sun logo on the album inlay art himself. He was an artist in every sense. But lyrically, this is basically a concept album about addiction.
It's harrowing. You listen to songs like Junkhead and Godsmack. He is not being metaphorical at all.
There's no poetry hiding the meaning. It's a direct diary entry. And then you have Jar of Flies in 1994. I really want to emphasize how crazy the success of this record was.
Because it was an EP.
It was an EP, 7 songs. They recorded in a week just to see what would happen.
Right. Usually EPs are just, throwaways, B-sides for the hardcore fans.
Exactly. But Jar of Flies debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart.
#1, an EP.
It was the first EP in history to do that. That just shows you the appetite the public had for this band. They didn't just want the heavy screaming stuff. They wanted the acoustic, atmospheric, beautiful, sad stuff too.
And Layne was writing a lot more by this point too, correct?
He was. He wrote about half the lyrics across their catalog before the reunion. But he was also picking up the guitar more on tracks like Angry Chair and Hate to Feel. That's Layne playing guitar.
And Jerry Cantrell, who is an undisputed guitar god, was totally supportive of that.
He was incredibly supportive. He went on record calling Angry Chair a masterpiece.
Yeah.
He loved that Layne was stepping up musically and bringing in his own riffs.
I love that dynamic. Jerry wasn't territorial. He wasn't like, I'm the guitar player. He was like, yeah, Layne, pick up the axe. Let's hear what you've got.
They really pushed each other. But as the artistic peak was happening, the personal valley was getting deeper and deeper. Which brings us to section 4. The struggle.
We can't avoid it. The addiction. It's the elephant in the room of his entire biography. But I want to be careful here not to just, list drugs and be sensational. I want to talk about the impact it had on him and the people around him.
The impact was devastating. But what's important to remember is that there are these moments of, let's call it functioning heroism, right in the middle of the mess. We have to talk about Brazil, 1993.
This was during the Dirt Tour.
Yes. The band is in Brazil headlining some huge festivals, and Mike Starr, the bassist, overdoses. And it's a bad one. I mean, he is dying. His heart is stopped.
And who's the one who steps in to save him?
Layne.
The guy who's deep in his own struggle.
Layne Staley, who is struggling with his own massive demons, has the presence of mind and apparently the medical knowledge from his own experiences to resuscitate his friend. He saved Mike Starr's life.
That is such a heavy, tragic irony. The guy who needs saving is the one doing the saving.
It shows that he wasn't just a zombie. He wasn't gone. He cared so deeply about his friends, and he was still in there. But then 1994 hits. April 1994.
Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain is found dead. And the entire Seattle music scene just freezes. For Layne, this wasn't just a news story about another rock star. This was a peer. This is a guy his age, from his town, in the same boat.
And it scared him.
The source material says Cobain's death scared Staley into temporary sobriety.
It must have felt like looking in a mirror. A terrifying mirror.
I can't imagine what that must have felt like. But, fear is a motivator that eventually wears off. He relapsed. And here is where we see the band's integrity really shine through.
Right, because Alice in Chains had the world at their feet at this point. They could have toured Jar of Flies and made millions of dollars.
They could have been the biggest band in the world. But the managers and the rest of the band, they said no.
They turned down the tour money.
They refused to put the band on the road. They canceled a huge tour with Metallica. They knew that if they put Layne on a tour bus with all the access and the pressure, he might die. They chose his life over the money.
That is incredibly rare in the music business. I mean, usually the machine just keeps grinding until the wheels fall off.
It speaks to how much they loved him. They were trying to protect him. But since Alice in Chains was on hiatus, Layne needed another outlet, a safer outlet. And this is where the band Mad Season comes in.
I adore the Mad Season album, Above. River of Deceit is one of the most beautiful songs ever written, period. But I didn't realize the band was essentially formed as an intervention.
It was basically a musical safe house. It was formed by Mike McCready of Pearl Jam.
Right.
And McCready was sober at the time. He grabbed Barrett Martin from Screaming Trees and a blues bassist named John Baker Saunders. And the idea was, let's surround Layne with sober musicians. Let's just get in a room and play blues. Let's keep it low pressure and positive.
Did it work?
Musically, it was an absolute triumph. It proved Layne could do so much more than just scream. He could sing the blues. He could be vulnerable and quiet. His voice on that album is heartbreaking.
It really is.
Personally. It helped for a while, gave him a focus. But the addiction was just too entrenched at that point.
I think there's a misconception that Layne thought drugs were cool, that he was promoting the lifestyle through his music.
And he absolutely hated that perception. There is a quote from a Rolling Stone interview in 1996 that is it's absolutely essential to understanding him. He said, "Drugs worked for me for years, and now they're turning against me.
I didn't want my fans to think that heroin was cool."
That's the key. Now they're turning against me. That is such a clear, lucid, and self-aware realization. He knew he was trapped. He wasn't glorifying it.
He also said, "I'm walking through hell and this sucks." He talked about how fans would come up to him and give him a thumbs up and say, "Hey man, I'm high too," thinking it would bond them.
And Layne was horrified by that. He didn't want to be the poster boy for heroin. He wanted to be a musician.
Let's move to the slow retreat. This is section 5, roughly 1996 to 2002. This is the period where he really fades from public view.
And the catalyst for the final withdrawal was another tragedy, October 1996. Demarie Laura Parrott, his former fiancée, died of an overdose.
And they were soulmates, by all accounts. Even though they had broken up, they were still deeply connected.
Mark Lanegan, another Seattle musician and a close friend, said that Layne never recovered from her death. He was placed on 24-hour suicide watch immediately after he heard the news. It seems like whatever fight he had left in him, a huge part of it died with her.
We did get that one last incredible performance, the MTV Unplugged show in April 1996, just a few months before she died, which is now just iconic.
It's iconic, but it is so hard to watch. You see the frailty. He's wearing sunglasses. He's wearing gloves to hide the track marks on his hands. He's incredibly thin. But the voice, the voice is still there.
That was basically the end of the road for live performances.
It was. His final show ever was on July 3, 1996. In Kansas City, opening for Kiss of all bands. After that, he went home to his condo in the University District of Seattle, and he basically just closed the door on the world.
The rumors from this era are gruesome.
They are. And unfortunately, many of them turn out to be true. In 1998, he briefly went back into the studio to record 2 final songs with Alice in Chains, Get Born Again and Died. And the producer, Dave Jordan, was absolutely shocked by his appearance.
What did he see?
He said Layne weighed 80 pounds.
80 pounds. He was 6 feet tall. That's skeletal.
He was, in Jordan's words, white as a ghost. He had lost several teeth, which affected his singing and gave him a noticeable lisp. His legs had atrophied from lack of use.
But he still sang.
But, and this is the miracle and the tragedy of Layne Staley, he stood in front of that microphone and he delivered. The power was still in his throat, even if the rest of his body was completely failing him.
His friends tried to reach him during this time, right? It wasn't like everyone just gave up on him.
No, not at all. Sean Kinney, the drummer, was relentless. He said he would call Layne 3 times a week, every week. He would go to the condo building and stand on the street and just yell up at his window, "Layne, pick up the phone, I'm here."
But Layne wouldn't answer the door.
He wouldn't answer.
Why? Do you think it was shame?
I think it was likely shame. And also maybe a form of protection. He didn't want his friends to see him in that state. He wanted to preserve their memory of who he was, not what he'd become.
But we should correct the record on one point. He wasn't completely alone. His mother, Nancy, insisted that the narrative of him being totally cut off wasn't true.
That's right. She visited him. She was there as late as February 2002, just 2 months before he died. So he had his family's love. But he was locked in a battle that he was losing day by day inside that apartment.
Which brings us to April 2002. And the timeline of the discovery is just, it's brutal.
It's a forensic timeline. It's cold and sad. In mid-April, his accountants were the first to notice something was wrong. They saw lack of activity in his bank account. No money had been withdrawn for 2 weeks. And for an addict, that's a huge red flag.
So they contacted his mother.
They contacted his mother, who then went to the apartment. This was April 19th.
And before they even opened the door, she knew something was wrong.
She knew.
Because of the cat.
Sadie, Layne's cat. She said Sadie was known to be a very quiet, silent cat. But Layne's mother could hear her meowing in distress from down the hallway, just screaming, basically, behind the locked door.
That detail, the cat crying behind the locked door, it grounds the horror in something so domestic and so sad.
It really does. She called 911. They broke the door down, and they found him on the couch. He'd been dead for 2 weeks. He weighed 86 pounds.
And the cause of death was an overdose, a speedball,
heroin, and cocaine. And the medical examiner, based on the state of the body, estimated that the date of death was April 5th.
April 5th, the exact same date that Kurt Cobain died 8 years earlier.
You couldn't write that in a movie script. People would say it was too contrived, too on the nose. But that is the reality. The 2 defining voices of Seattle grunge gone on the same calendar day.
There is one last piece of this puzzle that just makes it even heavier. The Mike Starr confession. This came out years later, didn't it?
Yeah, this was in 2010. Mike Starr, the original bassist, was on the TV show Celebrity Rehab. And he revealed a secret that he had been carrying for 8 years.
He was the last person to see Layne alone.
He was. On April 4th, it was Mike's birthday. He went over to Layne's condo to see him. And Layne was clearly in very bad shape. He was sick. Mike wanted to call 911. He begged him, "Let me call 911 for you."
And Layne refused.
Layne refused. He got angry. He threatened to never speak to Mike again if he made that call. They got into a huge argument. And Mike, who was high on benzodiazepines himself at the time, was emotional and confused. So he stormed out.
And Layne's last words to him.
As he was leaving, Layne yelled, "Not like this. Don't leave like this."
And Mike Starr carried that guilt to his own grave?
He did. He died of an overdose himself in 2011. He said in that interview that he blamed himself every single day for not making that call. This is just a tragedy compounded by tragedy.
So after all that darkness, we are left with the legacy. Section 7. How do we remember him?
Well, the immediate aftermath in Seattle was just this huge outpouring of love and grief. There was a public vigil at the Seattle Center. Jerry Cantrell dedicated his solo album, Degradation Trip, to Layne's memory.
And in a really touching personal gesture, Jerry adopted Sadie the cat.
He took the cat.
He took the cat home with him.
He did. He gave her a home for the rest of her life.
That makes me feel a little better about everything.
Me too. And the musical tributes were everywhere. Pearl Jam wrote a song called 42,002. Stain had a huge hit with a song just called Layne. Metallica has said that the title of their album, Death Magnetic, was inspired by him.
It shows the respect the entire heavy metal community had for him. He wasn't just a grunge guy to them. He was a titan of vocals.
He really was. And of course, Alice in Chains eventually came back.
They did, with William Duvall on vocals, and they handled it with so much grace and respect. The title track of their comeback album, Black Gives Way to Blue, is essentially a funeral dirge for Layne.
It's a beautiful, heartbreaking song. And who do they get to play piano on it?
Elton John?
Sir Elton John.
Which is an incredible full circle moment.
It's the perfect full circle moment because the very first concert Layne Staley ever attended as a little kid was an Elton John concert. And now, all those years later, Elton John is playing him out.
That is beautiful. So as we wrap this up, we started this deep dive looking for the human being behind the tortured artist headline.
And I think he's there. He's in all those details. He's the kid who changed his name to sound like a Mötley Crüe drummer. He's the guy who laughed while a male stripper auditioned terribly for his band.
He's the guy who saved his friend's life in Brazil in the middle of his own chaos.
He was funny, he was complex, he was kind, and he was undeniably, earth-shatteringly talented.
He was a singular talent. There will never be another voice like that.
Never.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with tonight. We often look back at the 90s and we romanticize the darkness. There's this myth that the heroin made the music better, that the pain was the fuel. But Layne Staley told us explicitly that the drugs turned against him.
He told us point blank that it wasn't cool.
Yeah.
That it sucked.
So when you listen to Man in the Box or Nutshell tomorrow on your drive to work, try not to hear it as a glorification of that lifestyle. Hear it as a warning. Hear it as a distress signal from a guy who knew he was losing the battle but kept singing through the static anyway.
That makes the music not just heavy, but brave. Incredibly brave.
Exactly. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Go listen to Jar of Flies deeply tonight. We'll catch you next time.